Dear friends, colleagues, partners, representatives of the mass media, accredited with the Brussels Press Club, I really appreciate your attendance, and today we are about to speak on certain and very important political developments in Uzbekistan. The Constitutional Commission of our country has accomplished a huge work to improving the country's basic law, which will serve to further strengthen the legal foundations of our ongoing political democratic reforms. Citizens of Uzbekistan did not stay away from the transformations began at the new stage, showing the initiative, putting forward many proposals and actively supporting reforms of the President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. The Constitutional Commission has received more than 60,000 proposals from the citizens, which clearly confirm the objective, vital need to put a constitutional reform on the agenda of our nation. The summarized proposals have been thoroughly and comprehensively discussed by the Constitutional Commission and submitted to the Legislative Chamber of the Oliy Majlis Parliament of Uzbekistan. The new version of the Constitution proposes to introduce about 200 changes to 64 articles, introduce 6 new articles and 16 new norms. On June 25th this year, a draft constitutional law on amendments to the constitutions was published for public discussion. The discussion is right now underway. It will last 10 days until July 5th. The updated constitution is designed to serve as a solid legal basis and reliable guarantor of the implementation of long-term development strategies for our state, the prosperous life of the country and the people. As President of Uzbekistan, His Excellency Shavkat Mirziyoyev noted at a meeting with members of the Constitutional Commission on June 20th, the essence and substance of the Constitution should be filled with the idea in the name of the honor and dignity of a person, and be based on the main principle of our current reforms, human society state, which is designed to become a fundamental value in our daily life. Dear ladies and gentlemen, let me draw your attention to the following priority areas of the constitutional reform and some key proposals included to the draft of the Constitution. The first direction is a person, his life, freedom, honor, and dignity, inalienable rights and interests. Therefore, a true elevation of his honor and dignity is a constitutional duty and priority task of state authorities. These principles will be clearly reflected and find their fundamental legal solution in the updated constitution. As you know, Uzbekistan gradually reduced the list of crimes which could lead to death penalty and then completely abolished such a punishment. President Mirziyoyev proposed to include in the constitution one important norm. Quote, "The death penalty is prohibited in the Republic of Uzbekistan." Quote is closed. It demonstrates that Uzbekistan will never step back on such a serious issue and remain committed to the ideals of humanism. The next proposal is to apply the Miranda law, which is reflected in the constitutions and laws of many states as well as international human rights instruments. That is, when detaining a person, he must be explained his rights and the reasons for detention in language accessible and understood by him. In addition, it is proposed to develop the Habeas Corpus Institute. A person may not be held in custody for more than 48 hours pending a court decision. If the court does not make a decision on the arrest of a person or restrictions of his freedom in another form within the prescribed period, then this person should be immediately released. The second direction is to consolidate the principle of Uzbekistan is a welfare state in the basic law. It is well known that welfare state creates decent living conditions for everyone based on the principles of social equality and justice. This is a model of state implementing an effective policy to reduce social differences and support those who are in need. With respect to this, first proposals, a welfare state implied the definition of minimum level of provision of housing and consumer goods necessary for life for those in need. The Constitution should enshrine the state obligations to protect citizens' rights to housing, guarantee its inviolability, as well as provide housing for all segments of the population, especially those in need. There is also another important point. As the centuries-old experience of development shows, it is impossible to build a strong welfare state without private property and its reliable guarantees. Therefore, in our basic law, it is planned to solidify the constitutional guarantees necessary to ensure the protection of private property. Secondly, for every person, the family is important and sacred value. A healthy and strong family is the backbone of a state and the main unit in the society. In the current stage of globalization, the need to create decent conditions for comprehensive protection, support, and strengthening of institution of family is increasing. Therefore, in order to develop constitutional basis of an institution of a family, it is proposed to enshrine in basic law the rule that the family is formed on the basis of voluntary consent and equality of women and men. It is a natural and main unit in society, remains under special protection of society and the state. Third, a very important direction of our policy is upbringing of children, or the meaning of life for our people, for our society, for our culture, and for their future. Currently, the young people under the age of 30 are about 60% of the country's total population. This is our greatest wealth and human resource. Consequently, an urgent issue is to enshrine in the Constitution a comprehensive support for the rights and freedoms, as well as the legitimate interests of our youth, young men and young women, the creators of the new Uzbekistan. Further enhancement of responsibility for the fate of the younger generation will also serve as the inclusion in the Constitution of a norm that parents are entitled and obliged to take care of the upbringing, education, health, comprehensive and harmonious development of children until they reach the age of puberty. Fourth, our national idea derives from the humanistic qualities of our people, including generosity, unselfish assistance to those in need, and the creation of equal conditions and persons with disabilities. Currently, there are about 1 million people with disabilities living in Uzbekistan. In recent years, the state policies to support them and create equal conditions for them have been raised to a completely new level. In particular, the Parliament adopted the law on the rights of persons with disabilities, ratified the International Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and created a solid legal framework for this sphere. Now, on the basis of the principle, persons with disabilities are full members of the society, it is proposed to include into the Constitution the following provisions. Any separation of persons with disabilities, restrictions of their rights, avoidance of creating conditions for their access to facilities and services shall be prohibited. Fifth, an important goal of the constitutional reform is to ensure reliable protection of human rights to work and decent living conditions, protections from unemployment and poverty reduction. It is proposed to enshrine in our basic law the right of everyone to work in favorable conditions, decent wages, introduce a rule that the minimum wage should be sufficient for the life of a person and his family. The basic law will establish a prohibition against refusal to hire, dismissal from work, and reduction of the wage of woman because of her pregnancy or the presence of a small child. Everyone knows that in recent years, a forced and child labor has been completely eradicated in our country. Recently, in recognition of this achievement, the international coalition Cotton campaigned and world-famous brands lifted the earlier issued boycott on cotton and textile products of Uzbekistan. In order to prevent this from happening again, to improve the effectiveness of the current system of human rights protections, it is proposed to enshrine in the Constitution the norms on the prevention of child labor. 6. A human health is greatest wealth of society. As life shows, only a healthy people, a healthy nation is capable of great achievements. For us, a human health is an important component to ensuring high life expectancy, preserving the gene pool of the nation, and the sustainability of the national strategy. In this regard, the general norm, everyone has the right to a qualified medical care, is insufficiently enshrined in the Constitution. It is proposed to expand this article and supplement it with directly applicable provisions. The next question is that we are all well aware of the importance of ecology, a favorable and safe environment in human development, and ensuring a prosperous life. A global climate change, the worsening situation associated with drying of the Aral Sea, make the issue of environmental security increasingly urgent. Therefore, environmental legal norms should be reflected in the Constitution. The third direction, the development of free and fair civil society. For our people, society begins, first of all, with a mahalla, which is cradle of kindness and education, for centuries carefully preserving national traditions and the rich spirituality of our people. The abode of friendship and good neighborliness. Currently, the transformation of mahalla into a truly popular structure where citizens can freely express their opinions and suggestions, find effective solutions to existing problems, is of an urgent importance. In order to develop this civil society institution, it is proposed to consolidate the status of mahalla and the task of the relevant state bodies in the basic law. At the same time, it is necessary to consolidate the obligation of state bodies to provide mahallas with comprehensive support in their activities. It is also high time to clearly stipulate in the basic law the role and status of other civil society institutions, political parties, movements, mass media, trade unions, foundations, and other public associations. The fourth direction is the construction of human democratic rule of law state in Uzbekistan. In a state governed by the rule of law, everybody is equal and responsible before laws adopted on the basis of democratic principles, and no one can be above the law. In this regard, it is proposed to consolidate the provision Uzbekistan is a state governed by the rule of law in our constitution and introduce the norms that ensure openness, transparency, and accountability of the activities of state bodies, their mobility and compactness. The basic law requires strengthening the provision of democracy, the mechanisms of checks and balances in the branches of government. Above all, it is introduced into the Constitution that the relevant provisions on expanding the authority of the Oli Majlis, Parliament of Uzbekistan, on forming a government and ensure its effective operations and functioning. In this regard, it is suggested to introduce the Senate's approval process for the decree appointing the head of the Anti-Corruption Agency of Uzbekistan. Along with this, the Parliament should have the authority to debate the government's yearly national report on fighting the corruption. It is proposed to delegate the Oli Majlis part of the President's authority, for instance, to provide the Senate the authority to appoint and remove the chairman of the accounting chamber. As a result, the accounting chamber shall become an important instrument of the parliamentary oversight of the formation and implementation of the state budget. In order to expand the participation of citizens in the management of state affairs, to reform the institution of a right of legislative initiative, it is proposed to introduce into the Constitution a provision of the institution of making legislative proposals. As part of this institution, citizens in the amount of at least 100,000 people will have the opportunity to submit the legislative proposals to the legislative chamber of the Oliy Majlis. That the people will acquire the right to initiate as a direct subject of lawmaking. It is also planned to accord the Senate of the Oliy Majlis, the Ombudsman, and the Central Election Commission the power to make a legislative proposal. Dear friends, the achievement of all our noble goals depends on ensuring peace and security in the country, interethnic and interfaith harmony. Precisely what our domestic and foreign policy pursued by the state is aimed at. Over the past period, we have strengthened cooperation with many states of the world, including the atmosphere of friendship and good neighborliness with all countries of Central Asia. In the present circumstances, when cardinal changes are taking place in our country and throughout the world, updating and improvement of the conceptual and legal framework of the foreign policy of Uzbekistan is of particular relevance. It must be emphasized that the national security concept of the Republic of Uzbekistan was approved in 1997, and the foreign policy concept of the Republic of Uzbekistan in 2012. It is plainly obvious that these important documents no longer fully correspond to the new conditions of the rapidly changing modern world. In this respect, taking into account the constitutional reform discussed by the general public of the country, it is proposed to develop a new edition of the national security and foreign policy concepts of the Republic of Uzbekistan and adapt in the form of constitutional laws. Dear ladies and gentlemen, partners, colleagues, as I mentioned earlier, public discussions on a draft constitutional law on amendments to the Constitution will continue until July 5th. According to the current legislation, the Parliament has a mandate to independently introduce amendments to the Constitution. But as it was said before, President Mirziyoyev proposed to implement a constitutional reform based on the opinions and support of all citizens through a referendum. It will become a true expression of the will of our people. The Constitution of the Republic of Uzbekistan will be truly a people's one. In conclusion, let me finish my today's presentation with the words of our President. Our approach is fully consistent with the principle: the people are the only source and the author of the Constitution. And each of our fellow countrymen will be able to proudly say, the Constitution of New Uzbekistan is my Constitution. Thank you for your attention. Appreciate assistance provided by the Brussels Press Club and all your participation. Thank you very much.